Jung's most disturbing insight wasn't about mental illness or psychological disorders. It was about empaths and why they consistently attract fake friends who systematically destroy their emotional well-being, drain their energy, and leave them psychologically devastated. In his clinical practice, Jung documented individuals with what he called empathic vulnerability syndrome, people whose emotional sensitivity made them perfect targets for what he termed unconscious emotional predators. These empaths could sense others' emotions with startling accuracy, but Jung discovered something terrifying. Their very sensitivity made them blind to manipulation, exploitation, and emotional parasitism from people who appeared to be genuine friends. Jung called this insight disturbing because empaths weren't just attracting fake friends by accident. Their psychological makeup actively drew predatory individuals who could sense their emotional vulnerabilities and exploit them with surgical precision. These fake friends didn't just hurt empaths. They systematically destroyed their ability to trust, connect authentically, and maintain healthy relationships for years or even decades. Not because empaths were weak or naive, but because their greatest strength, emotional sensitivity, had become their greatest weakness in a world full of unconscious emotional predators. Today, I'll reveal Jung's most disturbing insight about why fake friends are drawn to empaths like moths to flame, and why he believed this dynamic either completely destroys the empath's capacity for authentic relationship or forces them to develop psychological defenses that transform them into something far more dangerous than any fake friend could ever be. Before we continue exploring this revolutionary discovery, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our deep psychology content, leave your like to support the work, and comment which aspect of this topic resonates most with you. Now let's dive into the discovery that changed everything. The case that revealed Jung's most disturbing insight began with a patient he described in his private notes as the woman who collected broken souls and was destroyed by them. This patient came to Jung in 1916 during his intensive study of what he called empathic attraction patterns. She was a highly sensitive individual who had spent her entire adult life surrounded by friends who needed constant emotional support, financial assistance, and psychological rescue. But Jung quickly realized he wasn't treating someone who had bad luck with friendships. He was observing something far more systematic and sinister. Jung wrote, "The patient presents with a consistent pattern of attracting individuals who appear to need her empathic abilities, but who systematically exploit these abilities for their own psychological and material gain. Most disturbing is that she cannot recognize the exploitation even when presented with clear evidence of it." This patient would repeatedly form intense friendships with people who initially appeared vulnerable, wounded, or in need of emotional support. These individuals would share dramatic personal histories, express deep gratitude for her empathic understanding, and create the impression that she was the only person who truly understood them. But Jung observed a consistent pattern. Once these friends had established emotional intimacy with his patient, they would begin systematically exploiting her resources. They would borrow money they never repaid, demand constant emotional support while providing none in return, create crises that required her immediate attention and assistance, and gradually isolate her from other relationships by claiming these people didn't understand their special connection. Most devastatingly, when the patient would finally recognize the exploitation and attempt to establish boundaries, these fake friends would weaponize her own empathy against her. They would claim she was being heartless, remind her of their vulnerability, and manipulate her emotional responses until she felt guilty for protecting herself. Jung wrote, "The patient has become trapped in a cycle of empathic exploitation from which she cannot escape, because her very attempts to protect herself activate the guilt and compassion that originally made her vulnerable to exploitation." But Jung discovered something even more disturbing about this pattern. Because this patient's empathic abilities made her incredibly attractive to emotional predators, she had never actually experienced authentic friendship. Every relationship in her adult life had been based on her utility as an emotional resource rather than genuine mutual connection. Jung realized he was witnessing what he would later term empathic isolation syndrome, a condition where highly sensitive individuals become completely cut off from authentic human connection because their sensitivity attracts only those who wished to exploit it. Jung wrote in his personal notes, "The tragedy of the empathic individual is not that they cannot form friendships, but that their very capacity for deep emotional connection ensures they will primarily attract those incapable of reciprocating it. They become emotional resources rather than emotional partners, psychological tools rather than authentic friends." Therefore, Jung began investigating what he would call the Predator-Empath attraction dynamic. He discovered that fake friends didn't randomly encounter empaths. They actively sought them out with unconscious but systematic precision. Jung wrote, "There exists a category of individuals whose psychological development has been arrested at the narcissistic stage, who unconsciously scan their environment for empathic resources they can exploit for emotional regulation, validation, and material support." Modern research by Dr. Ramani Durvasula on narcissistic personality patterns validates Jung's early observations about predatory individuals who target empathic people. Her studies show that individuals with narcissistic traits specifically seek out highly sensitive people because they provide ideal sources of narcissistic supply. But Jung identified something more specific and more devastating within his psychological typology: the systematic destruction of empathic individuals through fake friendship exploitation. Jung observed that empaths who hadn't developed conscious discrimination abilities often fell victim to what he called empathic mirroring manipulation. Fake friends would unconsciously sense the empath's emotional patterns, then mirror back exactly what the empath most wanted to see in a friendship: vulnerability, gratitude, emotional depth, and special connection. Jung wrote, "The fake friend becomes a psychological mirror, reflecting the empath's own emotional needs and desires so perfectly that the empath becomes convinced they have found their authentic counterpart. But this mirroring is not genuine reciprocity. It is unconscious predation disguised as emotional intimacy." Jung identified 4 distinct types of fake friends that systematically destroy empaths. Type 1, the emotional vampire. Jung documented individuals who formed friendships with empaths specifically to drain their emotional energy through constant crisis and drama. These fake friends would always have overwhelming problems that required the empath's immediate attention and support. Jung wrote, "The emotional vampire does not seek friendship, but rather a personal psychological support system that operates entirely for their benefit. They create artificial intimacy through shared crisis, but the sharing only flows in one direction. These individuals would monopolize conversations with their problems, demand immediate responses to their emotional needs, and become angry or withdrawn when the empath tried to share their own experiences or needs. Most destructively, emotional vampires would escalate their crises whenever the empath tried to establish boundaries or focus attention elsewhere. They had an unconscious ability to sense when the empath's attention was drifting and would create emergencies that demanded immediate emotional rescue." Type 2, the material parasite. Jung identified fake friends who targeted empaths specifically for financial and material exploitation. These individuals would sense the empath's difficulty saying no and their tendency to help others, then systematically exploit these qualities for material gain. Jung wrote, "The material parasite understands intuitively that the empath's emotional sensitivity can be weaponized against their practical judgment. They create situations where saying no feels emotionally cruel, even when it is practically necessary. These fake friends would consistently borrow money, ask for favors, and request material assistance while providing elaborate emotional justifications for why the empath should help them. They would frame their requests in terms of the special, emotional bond they shared, claim that the empath was the only person who understood them well enough to help, and express deep gratitude that made the empath feel valuable and needed. But Jung observed that this gratitude was entirely performative, designed to ensure continued access to the empath's resources rather than expressing genuine appreciation. Type 3, the validation collector. Jung documented fake friends who formed relationships with empaths specifically to collect validation, praise, and emotional support for their ego needs. These individuals would share dramatic personal stories, present themselves as misunderstood or unappreciated by others, and position the empath as the only person who truly saw their value. Jung wrote, "The validation collector treats the empath as a mirror designed solely to reflect their own self-image back to them in the most flattering possible light. They do not see the empath as a separate individual with their own needs and experiences. These fake friends would monopolize conversations by steering every topic back to themselves, show no genuine curiosity about the empath's inner life, and become visibly uncomfortable or dismissive when the empath tried to share their own experiences. Most insidiously, validation collectors would use the empath's own sensitivity against them by claiming that others were too shallow or unconscious to appreciate them, positioning the empath as uniquely evolved or understanding. This made the empath feel special and chosen while actually isolating them from potentially authentic relationships. Type 4, the control manipulator. Jung identified the most dangerous category of fake friends, individuals who formed relationships with empaths specifically to gain psychological and behavioral control over them. These fake friends would systematically isolate empaths from other relationships, undermine their confidence and decision-making abilities, and create psychological dependency. Jung wrote, "The control manipulator recognizes that the empath's sensitivity can be exploited not just for resources or validation, but for total psychological dominance. They seek not just to use the empath, but to own them completely." These individuals would gradually convince empaths that other people in their lives didn't understand them, weren't truly supportive, or were somehow harmful to their well-being. They would create artificial crises that required the empath to choose between their fake friend and other relationships, always positioning themselves as the victim who needed protection and loyalty. Over time, they would systematically erode the empath's connection to family, authentic friends, and independent activities until the empath became completely dependent on the fake friend for social connection and emotional validation. Understanding your specific vulnerability pattern is crucial, because each type requires different approaches to what Jung called empathic discrimination development. But first, you need to understand why Jung considered this insight so disturbing, because Jung observed the devastating long-term effects of fake friendship exploitation on empathic individuals. Therefore, he concluded that this dynamic posed genuine dangers to empaths' psychological development and capacity for authentic human connection. Jung identified 3 specific dangers that made this insight so disturbing. Danger 1, complete destruction of trust capacity. Jung wrote, "The empath who has been systematically exploited by fake friends often develops what appears to be paranoid suspicion of all human relationships, but which is actually psychological self-protection against further exploitation." When empaths finally recognize they've been manipulated by people they trusted deeply, they often swing to the opposite extreme of trusting no one. Jung observed that empaths who had experienced multiple fake friendships would develop hypervigilance about others' motives, constantly scanning for signs of exploitation or manipulation. This hypervigilance, while protective, prevented them from forming any authentic connections because they became unable to distinguish between genuine vulnerability and manipulative vulnerability displays. Most tragically, these empaths often rejected authentic friends who showed genuine interest in reciprocal relationship because their exploitation trauma had taught them to interpret all emotional needs as potential manipulation attempts. Danger 2, identity dissolution through exploitation. Jung documented how systematic exploitation by fake friends caused empaths to lose contact with their own needs, desires, and authentic personality. After years of having their empathy weaponized against them, these individuals often no longer knew what they actually wanted or needed from relationships. Jung wrote, "The exploited empath becomes so accustomed to serving others' emotional and material needs that they forget they have legitimate needs of their own. They mistake self-sacrifice for love and exploitation for intimacy." These empaths would continue attracting fake friends because they had lost the ability to recognize what authentic friendship looked like or what they deserved from relationships. They had been conditioned to believe that their value lay entirely in their utility to others, making them perpetually vulnerable to further exploitation by anyone who showed interest in their empathic abilities. Danger 3, the development of empathic cruelty. Most disturbingly, Jung found that some empaths who had been repeatedly destroyed by fake friends would eventually develop what he called defensive empathic cruelty, using their sensitivity to detect others' vulnerabilities, and then deliberately exploiting those vulnerabilities as psychological self-protection. Jung wrote, "The empath who has been systematically victimized sometimes transforms into a psychological predator themselves, using their empathic abilities not for connection, but for preemptive attack against potential exploiters." These individuals would become hyper-aware of others' emotional weak points and would strike at these vulnerabilities at the first sign of potential exploitation. While this provided psychological protection against fake friends, it also made authentic friendship impossible because they had learned to weaponize the very sensitivity that originally made them vulnerable to exploitation. This is why Jung considered the development of empathic discrimination not just therapeutically important, but psychologically urgent. Because fake friendship exploitation posed such dangers to empaths' capacity for authentic human connection, therefore Jung developed what he called the discrimination integration process, a systematic approach to protecting empathic abilities while developing the capacity to distinguish between authentic and exploitative relationships. Phase 1. Recognition of exploitation patterns. Jung taught his empathic patients to first recognize the specific ways their sensitivity had been exploited by fake friends. He called this exploitation pattern awareness, the ability to identify the systematic methods predatory individuals use to target and manipulate empathic people. Jung wrote, "The empath must learn to recognize that their repeated victimization by fake friends is not bad luck or poor judgment, but the result of predictable patterns that can be identified and avoided." Technique. Jung instructed empaths to examine their friendship history and identify common patterns in how fake friends approached them, what emotional buttons they pushed, and what methods they used to maintain control and access to empathic resources. He taught them to recognize warning signs, excessive early intimacy, dramatic personal stories designed to elicit sympathy, requests for emotional or material support that weren't reciprocated, and attempts to isolate them from other relationships or activities. Phase 2. Boundary development without emotional shutdown. Jung discovered that empaths who had been exploited often tried to protect themselves by completely shutting down their empathic abilities, but this prevented them from forming any authentic connections. Instead, he taught what he called discriminating empathy, maintaining emotional sensitivity while developing clear boundaries about how that sensitivity could be accessed and used by others. Jung wrote, "The goal is not to stop feeling deeply, but to learn to feel selectively and protectively. The empath must maintain their gift while protecting it from exploitation." Jung instructed his patients to practice gradual boundary setting, starting with small limits on their availability for others' crises, requiring reciprocity and emotional sharing, and insisting on respect for their own emotional needs and experiences. He emphasized that healthy boundaries would initially feel cruel to empaths who had been conditioned to believe their value lay in unlimited availability for others' needs. Phase 3. Authentic friendship cultivation. The final phase involved what Jung called conscious relationship selection, actively seeking out and nurturing relationships with individuals capable of genuine reciprocity and mutual empathic exchange. Jung wrote, "The recovered empath must learn not just to avoid fake friends, but to recognize and attract authentic friends who appreciate their sensitivity without exploiting it." This required developing what Jung called empathic discernment, the ability to distinguish between genuine vulnerability that deserved empathic response and manipulative vulnerability, displays designed to exploit empathic resources. Jung taught empaths to look for friends who showed genuine curiosity about their inner lives, who could tolerate the empath having needs and boundaries, and who demonstrated empathic abilities themselves rather than simply benefiting from the empath's sensitivity. Because Jung understood that the fake friend dynamic either destroyed empaths or forced them to develop sophisticated psychological defenses, therefore he studied both successful and unsuccessful cases to understand what determined whether empaths recovered from fake friendship exploitation. The case of unrecovered empathic destruction. Jung documented several patients who never recovered from systematic fake friendship exploitation. These individuals had experienced such severe empathic abuse that they developed what he called empathic agoraphobia, complete withdrawal from social relationships due to terror of further exploitation. Jung wrote about one patient who had been systematically exploited by a series of fake friends over 2 decades. After her final exploitation experience, she became completely unable to form new relationships, interpreting any expression of emotional need from others as potential manipulation. Jung noted, the patient's empathic abilities remained intact, but her capacity to use them in service of authentic connection had been completely destroyed by repeated victimization. These cases represented what Jung saw as the complete failure of empathic discrimination development. Individuals whose sensitivity had been so thoroughly weaponized against them that they could no longer risk authentic human connection. The case of empathic discrimination mastery. Jung extensively studied individuals who had successfully recovered from fake friendship exploitation and developed what he called warrior empathy, the ability to maintain deep emotional sensitivity while being completely protected from exploitation. Jung wrote about a patient who had experienced severe fake friendship trauma, but eventually learned to use her empathic abilities as a sophisticated discrimination system. She could sense others' emotional authenticity with extraordinary accuracy, immediately identifying individuals who approached her with exploitative intent versus those seeking genuine connection. But unlike empaths who shut down emotionally, this patient maintained her capacity for deep empathic connection with authentic people while being completely immune to manipulation from fake friends. Jung wrote, "The patient developed what I can only describe as empathic sovereignty, the ability to feel deeply without being controlled by others' emotions, to give generously without being exploited, and to maintain connection without losing discrimination." Jung's own recovery from empathic exploitation. Most significantly, Jung documented his own experience with fake friendship exploitation during his early career. Jung wrote, "I discovered that my empathic abilities and desire to help others had attracted numerous individuals who were interested in my psychological insights and professional connections rather than authentic friendship." Jung's breakthrough came when he realized that many people he considered friends were actually using their relationship with him to gain access to his professional network, psychological knowledge, and social status. He wrote, "I learned that my empathic sensitivity had made me blind to others' ulterior motives, and my desire to be helpful had been systematically exploited by individuals who saw me as a resource rather than a person." This realization transformed his approach to both professional and personal relationships, moving from naive empathic availability to conscious relationship discrimination, because individuals with empathic sensitivity often struggle to distinguish between authentic and fake friendships. Therefore, Jung emphasized the crucial importance of learning what he called friendship authenticity indicators, specific signs that distinguish genuine friends from emotional predators. Jung wrote in The Development of Personality, "The empathic individual must learn to distinguish between relationships that honor their sensitivity and relationships that exploit it for others' gain." Jung identified 3 essential characteristics of authentic friendships for empaths. Characteristic 1, genuine reciprocity. Jung wrote, "The authentic friend demonstrates consistent interest in the empath's inner world, emotional experiences, and personal needs, rather than seeing the empath solely as a source of empathic support. Authentic friends would ask meaningful questions about the empath's experiences, remember important details about their life, and show genuine concern for their well-being rather than only seeking support for their own problems." Jung observed that authentic friends could tolerate the empath having bad days, personal struggles, and moments when they weren't available for emotional support. They didn't interpret the empath's own needs as selfishness or lack of care. Characteristic 2, respect for empathic boundaries. Jung identified genuine friends as those who could appreciate the empath's sensitivity without trying to exploit it for constant emotional caretaking. They understood that empathic abilities were a gift to be respected rather than a resource to be consumed. Jung wrote, "Those who truly value empathic sensitivity demonstrate this value through respectful engagement rather than exploitative consumption." Authentic friends would express gratitude for empathic support without taking it for granted. would offer empathic support in return when they were capable, and would respect the empath's need for emotional space and recovery time. Characteristic 3. Independent emotional regulation. Jung observed that authentic friends had developed their own capacity for emotional self-management rather than relying entirely on the empath for psychological stability. While they might occasionally need empathic support during genuine crises, their baseline emotional well-being didn't depend on constant access to the empath's emotional resources. Jung wrote, "The authentic friend appreciates empathic support without becoming addicted to it or dependent on it for their psychological functioning." The recognition process. Jung developed specific indicators for empaths to identify authentic versus fake friendships. Authentic friends maintain consistent emotional availability rather than only reaching out when they need support. They show genuine curiosity about the empath's perspectives rather than only seeking validation for their own views. They demonstrate what Jung called emotional maturity, the ability to handle their own feelings while appreciating empathic connection. They can tolerate the empath's empathic insights without becoming defensive or dismissive. They offer practical support and assistance rather than only expecting emotional caretaking. Gradual revelation protocol. Jung taught empaths a careful process for testing friendship authenticity. 1. Observe how they respond when you're unavailable for emotional support. 2. Notice whether they show interest in your experiences versus only sharing their own. 3. Assess whether they respect your emotional boundaries or consistently push against them. 4. Evaluate whether they offer reciprocal support during your difficult times. 5. Determine whether they appreciate your empathic abilities without taking them for granted. Jung emphasized, the goal is not to find perfect friends, but to find friends who demonstrate genuine care for your well-being rather than only seeing you as a source of empathic resources. Because authentic friendship serves both individual healing and collective emotional evolution when experienced by empathic individuals, therefore Jung viewed successful friendship discrimination as essential not just for personal well-being, but for the protection of empathic gifts that serve broader human development. Jung wrote in The Undiscovered Self, "The empath who learns to distinguish between authentic and exploitative relationships serves as a model for conscious relationship. Choice that benefits not only themselves but demonstrates healthy empathic boundaries for others to learn from." He believed that empaths who successfully develop friendship discrimination become what he called relationship wisdom carriers, people who help others understand the difference between authentic connection and exploitative relationships. Li Qiu Zhao. 4 stages of empathic friendship recovery. Stage 1. Exploitation recognition without self-blame. The first transformation occurs when empaths learn to recognize they've been exploited without taking responsibility for others' predatory behavior. Jung called this victim clarity, understanding that being targeted by fake friends was the result of their empathic gifts rather than personal failures. Jung wrote, "The beginning of empathic recovery is recognizing that your sensitivity attracted predators not because you were weak, but because predators specifically target empathic resources for exploitation." Stage 2. Discrimination development, without emotional shutdown. The second stage involves learning to protect empathic abilities while maintaining capacity for authentic connection. Jung called this protective empathy, developing sophisticated discrimination while preserving the capacity for deep emotional connection with authentic people. Jung observed, "The recovering empath learns not to feel less, but to feel more, selectively, maintaining empathic depth while developing predator-proof boundaries." Stage 3. Authentic friendship attraction without settling. The third transformation happens when empaths learn to actively seek out and attract relationships with people capable of genuine reciprocity and mutual empathic exchange. Jung called this conscious friendship creation, using empathic abilities to identify and nurture relationships with emotionally mature individuals. Jung wrote, "The privilege of empathic recovery is learning to use your sensitivity, not just to protect yourself from fake friends, but to identify and attract authentic friends who appreciate your gifts without exploiting them." Stage 4. Wisdom sharing without preaching. The final stage involves what Jung called empathic mentorship, helping other empaths learn friendship discrimination without becoming preachy or superior about their own recovery. Jung observed, "The fully recovered empath shares their discrimination wisdom naturally through example rather than through warnings, demonstrating healthy empathic boundaries that inspire others without lecturing them." The recovery becomes collective protection. Jung believed that empaths who successfully develop friendship discrimination serve a vital protective function for other empathic individuals. They model healthy empathic boundaries, help identify fake friends within communities, and create environments where authentic empathic connection can flourish safely. Jung wrote, "What is not brought to consciousness in empathic relationships manifests as systematic exploitation and the destruction of empathic gifts. Recovered empaths help make predatory friendship patterns conscious before they destroy other sensitive individuals." But Jung warned about specific pitfalls that can derail empathic recovery from fake friendship exploitation. Because the path of developing friendship discrimination contains specific dangers, therefore Jung documented the most common ways empaths sabotage their own recovery process. Pitfall 1. The paranoid overcorrection. Jung wrote extensively about empaths who became so hypervigilant about fake friends that they rejected all potential friendships, including authentic ones. In Psychological Types, he warned, "The danger is that the exploited empath becomes so focused on avoiding fake friends that they cannot recognize or accept authentic friendship when it appears." Empaths who had been severely exploited often developed what Jung called friendship paranoia, interpreting every friendly gesture as potential manipulation and every emotional need as exploitative intent. Jung observed, "The moment an empath believes all friendship is manipulation, they have allowed fake friends to destroy not just their past relationships, but their future capacity for authentic connection." Pitfall 2. The superiority complex. Development. Jung documented cases where empaths who had learned friendship discrimination became arrogant about their ability to see through others, developing a sense of superiority over people who hadn't learned these skills. Jung wrote, "Recovery from fake friendship exploitation requires humility about one's own previous vulnerability, not pride about current discrimination abilities." These empaths would become judgmental about others' friendship choices, preachy about relationship red flags, and condescending toward people who were still learning discrimination skills. Pitfall 3. The helper addiction transfer. Jung observed that some empaths who recovered from fake friendship exploitation would transfer their people-pleasing patterns into trying to save other empaths from similar exploitation. They would become addicted to warning others about fake friends, rescuing empaths from exploitative relationships, and positioning themselves as friendship discrimination experts. Jung warned, when empathic recovery becomes a new form of validation seeking, the person has not actually integrated their discrimination lessons, but has simply found a new way to feel needed and important. Pitfall 4. The isolation justification. Even successfully recovered empaths could regress into using their discrimination abilities to justify social withdrawal during periods of stress or disappointment. They would convince themselves that most people were fake friends waiting to exploit them, which Jung recognized as trauma response disguised as wisdom. Jung emphasized, discrimination is meant to help empaths find authentic friends, not to justify avoiding all friendship forever. The recovery maintenance. Jung developed ongoing practices for maintaining healthy empathic friendship discrimination. Regular assessment of relationship reciprocity and mutual support patterns. Conscious attention to whether friendships enhance your well-being or drain your empathic resources. Ongoing boundary practice to prevent regression into people-pleasing or unlimited empathic availability. Connection with other recovered empaths who understand the challenges of maintaining discrimination while preserving empathic openness. Regular solitude for processing empathic input and distinguishing between authentic friendship opportunities and potential exploitation attempts. Jung wrote, "The recovered empath does not achieve perfect discrimination, but learns to navigate friendships consciously while protecting their empathic gifts from systematic exploitation." Because Jung understood empathic friendship vulnerability within the context of collective relationship evolution, Therefore, he viewed empaths who develop discrimination as serving an essential educational function for broader human relationship consciousness. In The Undiscovered Self, Jung wrote, "The empath who has learned to distinguish between authentic and exploitative relationships serves as a teacher for conscious friendship choice that the collective desperately needs to learn." He believed that empaths with developed friendship discrimination serve as what he called relationship consciousness pioneers, individuals whose hard-won wisdom about authentic versus fake friendship provides templates that benefit broader human relationship evolution. The historical pattern. Jung observed that throughout history, empathic individuals often served as early warning systems for exploitative relationship patterns that would eventually need to be recognized and addressed. Collectively, Jung wrote, "What appears in the discriminating empath first as personal friendship wisdom later manifests in the collective as improved relationship standards, reduced tolerance for exploitative friendship patterns, and better recognition of authentic versus manipulative connection." Modern manifestations. Jung believed that in the modern era, empaths with friendship discrimination might be identifying relationship patterns that explain authentic versus fake friendship indicators, healthy empathic boundaries in relationships, recognition of emotional exploitation and manipulation tactics, and the difference between genuine vulnerability and manipulative emotional displays. Jung's insight. The empathic individual feels the collective need for authentic relationship first and most intensely. Their personal friendship discrimination often reflects what the entire culture needs to learn about protecting sensitivity while maintaining openness to genuine connection. The service without sacrifice. Jung's crucial insight was that empathic sensitivity serves relationship evolution best when it's protected through conscious discrimination rather than destroyed through naive availability. The goal isn't to become suspicious of all friendship, but to become wise about the difference between authentic and exploitative connection. Jung wrote, "The empath serves human relationship evolution not by sacrificing themselves to fake friends, but by demonstrating what conscious empathic friendship looks like: deep connection with clear boundaries, generous availability with protective discrimination, and authentic vulnerability with sophisticated predator detection." The ultimate discrimination. At the highest level of development, Jung observed that empaths learn to use their sensitivity as both a connection tool and a protection system, feeling deeply while maintaining complete clarity about others' motives, offering empathic support while being immune to manipulation, and maintaining openness to authentic friendship while being completely protected from exploitation. Jung called this empathic sovereignty, the ability to serve relationship evolution naturally through demonstrating conscious empathic friendship without preaching about discrimination or withdrawing from human connection entirely. Remember, Jung's patient from 1916, the woman who collected broken souls and was destroyed by them. After 5 years of working with Jung's discrimination integration process, her life transformed completely. She learned to distinguish between genuine vulnerability and manipulative emotional displays. She found friendships with people who appreciated her empathic abilities without exploiting them for constant emotional support. She built relationships based on mutual care and reciprocal empathic exchange, rather than one-sided emotional rescue dynamics. Most importantly, she stopped experiencing fake friends as evidence that she was unworthy of authentic friendship and began understanding them as Jung called predatory individuals who target empathic resources, but who can be identified and avoided through conscious discrimination. Jung wrote about her transformation. The patient learned not to trust less deeply, but to trust more wisely, not to feel less empathically, but to direct her empathy toward those capable of reciprocating it. Her empathic gifts remained intact, but her friendship choices became conscious rather than unconsciously driven by others' emotional manipulation. This represents Jung's most disturbing insight about fake friends and empaths, that empathic individuals will consistently attract fake friends who systematically exploit their sensitivity until they develop conscious discrimination abilities. And this exploitation will either completely destroy their capacity for authentic human connection or force them to develop exactly the friendship wisdom that humanity needs for relationship evolution. Your empathic sensitivity isn't a weakness that attracts fake friends. It's a powerful gift that predatory individuals target for exploitation because they recognize its value. You're not naive for trusting people who manipulated your empathy. You were targeted by individuals who specialize in exploiting empathic resources. The question isn't whether you should shut down your empathic abilities to avoid fake friends. The question is whether you'll develop the discrimination skills necessary to protect your empathic gifts while remaining open to authentic friendship with people capable of genuine reciprocity. Jung's discrimination integration method offers a path from empathic exploitation to conscious empathic friendship, from fake friend victimization to authentic relationship wisdom, from naive empathic availability to sophisticated empathic sovereignty. You were born to connect deeply, not to be exploited unconsciously, but to serve relationship evolution through demonstrating conscious empathic friendship. The world needs your empathic abilities, but it needs them protected through discrimination, wisdom that transforms empathic vulnerability into empathic strength. Your empathic sensitivity is not your weakness. Your lack of discrimination about who deserves access to your empathic resources is your weakness. Learn to discriminate consciously, and you become exactly what Jung believed recovered empaths were meant to be. Relationship wisdom carriers helping humanity learn the difference between authentic and exploitative human connection. Jung's most disturbing insight about fake friends wasn't that they target empaths. It's that most empaths who experience fake friend exploitation never learn to discriminate consciously, remaining vulnerable to continued exploitation throughout their lives. The tragedy isn't in attracting fake friends initially, but in failing to develop the discrimination wisdom that transforms empathic vulnerability into empathic sovereignty. You are not too trusting for this world. You are exactly what relationship evolution requires. Once you learn to use your empathic discrimination as consciously as Jung learned to use his psychological insights, the disturbance of fake friend exploitation isn't that you were victimized, but that you might never learn to protect your empathic gifts with the discrimination wisdom they demand. If you recognize yourself in Jung's description of the empath, who attracts fake friends, you're part of a sensitive group that Jung believed essential for relationship consciousness evolution. Share in the comments which type of fake friend exploitation you've experienced. Your recovery journey connects with others walking the same path, from empathic victimization to conscious friendship discrimination. Subscribe for more insights into Jung's discoveries about relationship patterns that transcend conventional understanding of friendship and empathic connection. If you're ready to explore more of Jung's insights about empathic vulnerability and protection, check out my video on Jung's most dangerous discovery about empathic boundaries, where I reveal the psychological traps that make empaths vulnerable to all forms of exploitation, and Jung's strategies for developing empathic sovereignty in an unconscious world. Thank you for watching. See you in the next dimension.